Objection. Your Honor, that's completely out of line. 13-year-old Maya Johnson, a whirlwind of braids and fiery determination, stood tall in the courtroom, her voice ringing with unexpected power. Judge Thompson, a man whose face seemed permanently set in a scowl, sneered down from the bench. Well, well, he drawled, his voice dripping with condescension. If it isn't little Maya, playing lawyer, perhaps you should run home and play with your dolls, instead of wasting the court's time with your unique interpretation of the law. A hush fell over the room. Maya's heart pounded, but her gaze remained locked on the judge. I may be 13, Your Honor, she retorted, but I know my rights. And I know when someone is trying to pull a fast one. Racist Judge MOCKS black girl in court, until she destroyed him with her legal genius. But what exactly had led to this dramatic courtroom showdown on this Tuesday, October 24th, at precisely 2:17 p.m.? How did Maya, a seemingly ordinary teenager from Brooklyn, find herself facing off against a seasoned judge known for his, let's just say, less than progressive views? The answer, as it so often does, began with a seemingly small injustice. But before we get to that, what will happen next in this tense courtroom drama? Will Maya be able to stand up to the judge's prejudice and expose the truth? Let's rewind a bit. It all started with a missing bike. Maya's bright pink, sparkly bicycle, a gift from her grandma, had vanished from her front yard. Not just any bike, mind you, but the one she'd saved up for months to customize with a super cool bell that played the Imperial March from Star Wars. Maya was devastated. This wasn't just transportation. It was her prized possession, her escape, her joy. Her best friend, Carlos, a lanky kid with a knack for technology, had immediately offered his help. He even tried to track it using a hidden GPS tracker Maya had sneakily attached to the bike frame, a trick she learned from her favorite spy novel. Sadly, the tracker went offline shortly after the bike disappeared. Maya and Carlos, fueled by a potent mix of righteous anger and teenage ingenuity, plastered lost bike posters all over their neighborhood. They even went door to door, asking if anyone had seen anything. Most people were sympathetic. Some offered lukewarm condolences, and a few even chuckled at the Imperial March detail. But one grumpy old neighbor, Mr. Henderson, seemed particularly dismissive. He mumbled something about kids these days and slammed his door in their faces. Maya couldn't shake the feeling that he knew more than he was letting on. A few days later, a glimmer of hope appeared. A local pawn shop owner, Mrs. Rodriguez, called the police. Someone had tried to pawn a bright pink bike with a, you guessed it, a Star Wars bell. Maya and Carlos raced to the police station, their hearts pounding with anticipation. But when they got there, they were met with a frustrating roadblock. The police officer, Officer Johnson, no relation to Maya, ironically, explained that the bike had already been processed as evidence in another case. Apparently, it had been found abandoned near a park, linked to a series of petty thefts. The police were more interested in catching the bigger fish, not in returning Maya's beloved bike. Maya was furious. This wasn't just about the bike anymore. It was about the principle. She felt like nobody was taking her seriously, like she was just a kid whose feelings didn't matter. That's when her mom, a paralegal with a sharp wit and an even sharper sense of justice, stepped in. "We're not letting this go," she declared, her voice firm. "We're going to take this to court." And that's how Maya, armed with her mom's legal knowledge and her own unwavering determination, found herself in Judge Thompson's courtroom. The judge, however, seemed more interested in dismissing Maya's case than in hearing it. He made snide remarks about her age, her childish concerns, and even mocked her Star Wars bell. He clearly didn't think a little girl could possibly understand the complexities of the legal system. He was wrong, very wrong. Judge Thompson leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips. "Now, little lady," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "why don't you tell me, in your own sophisticated legal terms, why this court should care about your missing toy?" Maya took a deep breath, her eyes flashing. "Your Honor," she began, her voice surprisingly steady, "this isn't just about a bike. It's about justice. It's about the fact that my property was stolen, and the police are refusing to help me get it back. It's about—" Suddenly, the courtroom doors burst open, and a gasp rippled through the room. Standing in the doorway, holding Maya's bright pink bike high above his head, was Mr. Henderson. He was panting, his face red and flustered. I confess, he stammered. I took the bike. I needed the money. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Judge Thompson's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. Maya stared at Mr. Henderson, her mind reeling. What was going on? Why would he steal her bike? And what would happen next? Would this confession solve everything, or was there something more sinister at play? The courtroom, moments ago a scene of tense formality, was now a whirlwind of confusion. Mr. Henderson, still clutching Maya's pink bicycle like a life raft, stood trembling in the sudden spotlight. Judge Thompson, his composure momentarily shattered, banged his gavel with a force that threatened to split the wood. Order! Order in the court! He bellowed, his voice a mixture of surprise and annoyance. Maya, her initial shock giving way to a surge of curiosity, watched the scene unfold with wide eyes. Why would Mr. Henderson, the grumpy old man who barely acknowledged her existence, suddenly confess to stealing her bike? And why now, in the middle of her court case? Something didn't feel right. Officer Johnson, looking as bewildered as everyone else, quickly moved to apprehend Mr. Henderson. The old man, his face etched with regret, offered no resistance. I'm sorry, he mumbled, his voice barely audible above the din. I didn't mean to cause any trouble. I needed the money. As Mr. Henderson was led away, whispers filled the courtroom. Speculations flew like wildfire. Had he been pressured to confess? Was this a desperate attempt to avoid a harsher sentence in some other, unrelated case? Or was there something more to this story? Something hidden beneath the surface? Judge Thompson, having regained a semblance of control, addressed the court. Well, he declared, his voice laced with thinly veiled disdain, it seems we have a confession. Case dismissed. He slammed his gavel once more, as if to punctuate his dismissive tone. But Maya wasn't satisfied. This sudden confession, conveniently timed to interrupt her testimony, felt too orchestrated, too perfect. She had a nagging suspicion that something was amiss, that there was more to this story than met the eye. Your Honor, she spoke up, her voice clear and resolute. I believe there's more to this than Mr. Henderson's confession. I request that this case be further investigated. Judge Thompson's eyes narrowed. Young lady, he said, his voice dripping with condescension, the man has confessed. What more is there to investigate? With all due respect, Your Honor, Maya countered, her gaze unwavering. I believe Mr. Henderson may have been coerced. His confession seems suspicious. A murmur of agreement rippled through the courtroom. Even some of the seasoned lawyers present couldn't deny the odd timing of Mr. Henderson's confession. Judge Thompson, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, realized he couldn't simply dismiss Maya's concerns. Very well, he conceded, his voice laced with reluctance. Officer Johnson, I'm ordering you to conduct a thorough investigation into Mr. Henderson's confession. See if there's any truth to this young lady's suspicions. Officer Johnson, sensing the underlying tension, nodded curtly. He approached Maya, his expression a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Ms. Johnson, he said, I'll need your full cooperation in this investigation. Can you tell me anything that might support your claim of coercion? Maya, her mind racing, recounted the events leading up to the trial. She described her encounter with Mr. Henderson, his dismissive attitude, and the feeling that he knew more than he was letting on. She also mentioned the strange occurrences she'd experienced in the days leading up to the trial. The feeling of being watched, the mysterious phone calls, the unsettling feeling that someone was trying to silence her. Officer Johnson listened intently, taking notes. He couldn't ignore the mounting evidence that something wasn't right. This case, initially a simple matter of a stolen bike, was quickly unraveling into something far more complex and potentially sinister. As Officer Johnson delved deeper into the investigation, Maya and Carlos decided to do some digging of their own. They revisited the pawn shop, hoping to glean more information from Mrs. Rodriguez. The kind-hearted pawn shop owner, sensing their determination, shared a crucial detail. She remembered seeing Mr. Henderson talking to someone in a black car just before he tried to pawn the bike. She couldn't identify the person in the car, but she remembered a distinctive detail, a gold watch with a large ruby on its face. Armed with this new information, Maya and Carlos returned to the courthouse, their resolve strengthened. They knew they were getting closer to the truth, but they also knew they were treading on dangerous ground. Someone was clearly trying to protect Judge Thompson, and they were willing to go to great lengths to do so. As Maya and Carlos entered the courthouse, they noticed a group of men in dark suits loitering near the entrance. The men eyed them suspiciously, their expressions hard and unwelcoming. Maya felt a shiver run down her spine. She recognized these men. They were the same ones who had been following her and her mom. Judge Thompson's henchmen. The men stepped forward, blocking their path. "You too," one of them growled, his voice menacing. "You need to stop poking around where you don't belong. This isn't your fight." Maya, her heart pounding, stood her ground. "This is about justice," she declared, her voice trembling but firm. "And we won't back down until we get it." The men exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. One of them reached into his jacket, his hand disappearing into the folds of his clothing. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She knew they were in danger. Just then, a voice boomed from behind them. "Leave them alone!" Maya and Carlos turned to see Officer Johnson striding towards them, his face grim. He had been following them, keeping a watchful eye on their movements. He had suspected that Judge Thompson might try to intimidate them, and he wasn't going to let that happen. The men, seeing Officer Johnson's badge, hesitated. They knew they couldn't openly threaten Maya and Carlos with a police officer present. With a final glare, they retreated, melting back into the shadows. Officer Johnson turned to Maya and Carlos, his expression serious. "You two need to be careful," he warned. "This is more dangerous than you realize." Maya nodded, her determination unwavering. "We know," she said, "but we won't be intimidated. We'll keep fighting, no matter what." As they walked into the courthouse, Maya felt a mix of fear and excitement. She knew they were on the right track, but she also knew that the stakes were higher than ever. The next chapter of their journey promised to be even more perilous, but they were ready for the challenge. They had the truth on their side, and they wouldn't rest until justice was served. The atmosphere inside the courthouse was thick with tension. News of Judge Thompson's alleged misconduct had spread like wildfire, and the usually bustling halls were now filled with hushed whispers and curious glances. Reporters camped outside, their cameras flashing, eager to capture any development in the unfolding drama. Maya, accompanied by Carlos and Officer Johnson, navigated the maze of corridors, their footsteps echoing in the tense silence. They headed towards Judge Thompson's chambers, armed with the new information gleaned from Mrs. Rodriguez. The detail about the gold watch with the ruby. It was a small clue, but Maya hoped it would be enough to unravel the conspiracy surrounding Mr. Henderson's confession. As they approached the judge's chambers, they noticed a familiar figure lurking near the door, Mr. Henderson. He looked anxious and agitated, his eyes darting nervously around. "Mr. Henderson," Maya called out, her voice filled with concern. "What are you doing here?" Mr. Henderson jumped, startled by their sudden appearance. He hesitated for a moment, then shuffled towards them, his gaze fixed on the floor. I need to talk to you," he mumbled, his voice barely a whisper. They led him to a quiet corner, away from prying eyes. Mr. Henderson, his hands trembling, confessed that he had been pressured to confess to stealing Maya's bike. He revealed that Judge Thompson had approached him, offering a reduced sentence in his own pending case in exchange for his cooperation. He had been desperate, facing eviction and mounting debts, and the judge's offer had seemed like a lifeline. "But I never meant to hurt anyone," Mr. Henderson said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I just wanted to help myself. I didn't realize—" Maya, her heart aching for the old man, placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "It's okay, Mr. Henderson," she said softly. "We understand. You were just trying to survive." Mr. Henderson, relieved to have finally unburdened himself, provided them with a crucial piece of information. He described the man who had acted as Judge Thompson's intermediary, a tall, imposing figure with a gold watch adorned with a large ruby. The description matched perfectly with the man Mrs. Rodriguez had seen talking to Mr. Henderson. Armed with this confirmation, Maya, Carlos, and Officer Johnson knew they were on the right track. They had a witness, a motive, and a connection to Judge Thompson. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. They returned to Judge Thompson's chambers, this time with a renewed sense of purpose. Officer Johnson knocked on the door, and a gruff voice barked, "Come in." Judge Thompson, his face etched with annoyance, looked up from his desk. "What is it now?" he snapped, his eyes flitting between Maya, Carlos, and Officer Johnson. "Your Honor," Officer Johnson said, his voice firm and unwavering. "We have new evidence in the case of Ms. Johnson's stolen bike. Evidence that suggests Mr. Henderson's confession may have been coerced." Judge Thompson's eyes widened in alarm. "Coerced?" he sputtered. "That's preposterous. The man confessed in open court." "Yes, he did," Officer Johnson countered. "But we have reason to believe he was pressured to do so. We have a witness who can corroborate Mr. Henderson's claims, and we have evidence linking you to the individual who allegedly coerced him." Judge Thompson's face paled. He knew the game was up. He had underestimated Maya, dismissing her as a mere child. But Maya, with her sharp mind and unwavering determination, had outmaneuvered him, exposing his corruption and bringing him to justice. I have no idea what you're talking about," Judge Thompson stammered, his voice weak and unconvincing. Officer Johnson stepped forward, placing a restraining hand on the judge's arm. "Your Honor," he said, his voice grave, "I'm placing you under arrest for obstruction of justice and abuse of power." Judge Thompson's face crumpled. He looked around the room, his eyes pleading for help, but no one came to his rescue. His career, his reputation, his entire life lay in ruins. As Judge Thompson was led away in handcuffs, Maya felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had faced a powerful adversary, a man who had used his position to intimidate and silence her. But she had refused to back down, and in the end, justice had prevailed. The news of Judge Thompson's arrest sent shockwaves through the legal community. His case became a symbol of the fight against corruption and prejudice, a testament to the power of one young girl's courage and determination. Maya, once dismissed as a little girl, became an inspiration to others, a shining example of how even the most formidable opponent can be defeated with perseverance and a belief in justice. Her story resonated with people far and wide, reminding them that even in the face of adversity, the truth will always find a way to prevail. But the story doesn't end there. The repercussions of Judge Thompson's actions were far-reaching, and the fight for justice was far from over. Maya, Carlos, and their allies knew that they had won a battle, but the war against prejudice and corruption was still raging. They were determined to continue their fight, to use their voices to advocate for a fairer and more just society. And so, the story of the racist judge who mocked a black girl in court, only to be destroyed by her legal genius, became a chapter in a larger narrative, a story of courage, resilience, and the unwavering pursuit of justice.